Franchising is the most misunderstood and most overlooked form of entrepreneurship. We're here to educate you and help you find the entrepreneur within. Franchising is not all about the French fries.
We find that individuals who are exploring business ownership tend to have a lot of misperceptions and misunderstandings about the franchise industry. So what we want to do is help prospective business owners make confident and educated decisions before moving forward or not moving forward with a business. Welcome to Unpredicted Entrepreneur.
Hello and welcome to episode 78 of Unpredicted Entrepreneur. My name is Sarah Wasco and I am joined by my colleague Roxanne Rapsky. We created this podcast to present to you everything related to business ownership and specifically franchising. We are thrilled today to welcome our guest, Alan Young. Alan is the founder and CEO of Art of Drawers, which is one of the franchise brands that we work with. So welcome, Alan.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. So one of the things Roxanne and I enjoy so much about this podcast is really hearing founder stories. How did you become an entrepreneur and eventually evolve into this franchise, Art of Drawers? And you have a very interesting story, started at a young age. So tell us a little bit about when you got the bug for entrepreneurship.
Yeah, so it was a little bit early. The age of 5 is when I started my first business. So I remember my neighbor.
Okay, age of 5 years old, like kindergarten, right?
Yeah, kindergarten.
Okay, I was playing in the sandbox then. So sorry to interrupt you, but I just think that's worthy of repeating. So you were 5 and what happened?
Yeah, and so I was an accidental entrepreneur. I was not looking for a business to start, but my neighbor asked me to pull some weeds or do some sort of small job in his backyard. So I said, sure. And he gave me $5, which this is 1975. That was a big, big deal. And I'm like, wow. So I started knocking on doors at all the neighbors and asking them if there's any odd jobs to do. And this is back when all the kids were outside. Our parents would say, don't come home until dinner. There was 4 channels on the one TV in the house. So we were all outside doing stuff. So everybody was looking for stuff to do. So my friends very quickly saw me doing that and they're like, hey, can we come help out? Can we do this? And I said, sure. So I was a little bit like the Verizon guy. I was knocking on the door. And then I had this team of people standing behind me and like, do you have any jobs for us? So they would always give us something. And that's one of my tips, like start early as an entrepreneur. People say yes to kids on just about anything. But they would give us these jobs, and about 3 or 4 months later, I remember my dad came in my room and he saw me like stacking 1s and 5s and 20s, and I was like counting my money and getting all organized. He's like, "Where did you get all that money from?" And I told him what I was doing, and he looked at me and goes, "Well, how much are you paying the kids that are helping you out?" And all of a sudden, I felt really guilty. My dad was a Baptist minister, so he just looked at me and I got this instant guilt and I said, I didn't know I needed to pay them. I had no idea. And they didn't ask for any money. So that was my first business, the most profitable one. My revenue was my profit. No overhead, no employee cost. Now I felt bad. So I went back and I remember I bought a bunch of like cap guns and orange Tic Tacs were a big thing back then. So I bought all this stuff and handed it out to everybody because I didn't know that I was supposed to pay them.
So that was a lesson learned very early about entrepreneurship. You said you had 14 businesses by the time you started high school.
Yep.
And
wow.
You, one thing, you were very innovative. You know, you mentioned the neighbor invited you to start pulling weeds and then you started doing some other things. Tell us about what you did with the tape recorder.
So I mentioned before my dad was a Baptist minister and he had one of the first tape recorders anybody had ever seen. It was that big square block with the D batteries and you press play and record at the same time. So he had that tape recorder and I remember borrowing it and taking it up to my tree house. And I let my friends record anything they want for 20 seconds. And it didn't cost anything, but they had to pay a dime every time they wanted to play it back. So kids were just, recording things that probably shouldn't have been said by kids. So they just want to hear it over and over again. We were all laughing. Thought it was fun. So people want to play their stuff back quite often. So that was pretty lucrative and a lot of fun.
I love it.
Very ingenuitive for sure. And then you become an adult and you don't want to hear your voice recorded at all. Ever.
That changes for sure. So tell us kind of what happened. You went to finish school and join the military. Is that right?
Yeah. So I think a big part of my story is I got to high school and I obviously wanted to be an entrepreneur. I had 14 businesses, some success. They all obviously failed. So I think that was really critical where I got to learn how to fail. They fail for different reasons, but I was very kind of hooked on starting businesses, being an entrepreneur. But this was 1986, 87, 88 in high school. And back then, being an entrepreneur was not a cool thing at all. It was your crazy uncle that's lost all of his money twice. So my high school guidance counselor said, you really can't just go be an entrepreneur. You need to really go into corporate America, work 10, 15 years, and then maybe you can start your own business. So I listened to her. Probably shouldn't have, but back then that seemed to make sense. But it turned out to be a really good deal. I went to college, went in the Army, became a commissioned officer and learned a lot about leadership. And then when I got out of the military, started businesses.
Well, certainly, like you said, you kind of listened to your guidance counselor back then, and a lot has changed. And it's interesting. Roxanne and I talk about this a lot, how much, entrepreneurship is now being taught at a much younger age because we're your era, a little ahead of you. And that was not a thing. You were supposed to start a job, get your education, start a job, and work your way up in the company and get a gold watch and retire from that company. And it's just not the case anymore. So we've enjoyed seeing a lot of younger entrepreneurs take the leap.
Yeah, things have changed a lot, even leadership. My senior year in college, I went to the University of Richmond, and they started the Jepson School of Leadership. It was the second leadership school in colleges ever. So it was very early on, but the debate was literally, can you teach leadership? Which is just really interesting to look back on. I think we all now know that you can, but entrepreneurship, leadership has definitely changed a lot.
Most definitely.
Yeah. Even in the last 17 years since I took the plunge into franchising and business ownership, it was the demographic of our client has changed so much since then.
And the technology has helped out a lot too. I remember my earlier businesses, adult businesses, were very difficult because you didn't have the internet. Even just incorporating a company, you had to go sit down with a lawyer in their stuffy office, pay them $2,000. Just trying to figure out marketing, payroll. There's just technology has made things so much easier. It's taken a lot of the friction out of that process of starting up and running a business.
So tell us a little.
Great segue.
Go ahead.
Great segue into telling us or explaining what you did that first year when you got out of college or left the Army, right?
So my first business after college was a home automation business. So this was right after 9/11, which is a really interesting time, very dissimilar to the pandemic because people stopped traveling. People were spending a lot of money on their homes. It was very early on. This is before Geek Squad. Really, high-speed internet was just coming out, but the high-speed internet companies would come in and hook it up to one computer. They would not network it. So I'd spent about a week trying to figure out how to network and put computers together and figure it out. I'm like, no one's really going to spend a lot of time figuring out how to do this. So that was the initial business. The average sale was about $250. We would hook up a couple of your computers. And then people started asking about HDTV and home automation. And every time they ask about it, I'm like, I don't know how to do it, but we'll go figure it out. And then we figured it out and started doing it for everybody. So my average sale went from probably around $250, and then it jumped up to about $20,000 was the average sale 6 months later.
Wow.
That was a really lucrative business. And the lesson I learned there was I was not passionate about it. I was really just giving more stuff to people that had a lot of stuff. There was no real noble purpose, no big life-changing event other than, hey, come over, look at all this stuff that I have that I got that's really cool. So I sold that business after the first about year and a half, moved up to Virginia, which is where I'm originally from, and started an indoor air quality business. So that we were cleaning the air in people's homes, which I found to be a big difference in people's lives. That was something I was really passionate about doing, I really enjoyed doing. You go into people's homes, they have kids suffering from allergies, asthma, just a lot of things. When you can make an impact like that, that was night and day. Even though the other business was really lucrative, just the passion I think you really want to have when you're running a business. And I was willing to walk away and sell that other one really quickly.
That's really, that's really interesting. And I like hearing you say that even though you were making money, it wasn't the right business for you and you weren't feeling fulfilled. And we have a lot of clients that really are at a point in their life where they want to make a difference. So kind of very similar thought process to what you experienced. And it wasn't all about the money. So tell us a little bit more and how you evolved into what you're doing now, because what you're doing now is not at all related to what you were doing formerly.
No, so that business, I was passionate about it, grew. In the first year, I did 1.3 million in revenue, 37% net profit. So I was somewhat patting myself on the back. And but behind the scenes, I was working 19, 20 hours a day, 6 days a week. I'd work half a day on a Sunday, sleep in a little bit, get some rest, and do it all over again. So I grew that very quickly. And I thought that's what it was supposed to be like being an entrepreneur, that, you start a business, you just grind and grind and grind. And the best analogy I can come up with, when I was in the Army for 5 years, the fifth year, I remember I was running a lot, running marathons, and I'd run in the morning, put on my combat boots, go to work, and it got harder and harder to walk. So I finally went to the Army podiatrist, and he looked at my feet and he goes, I can tell you what it is instantly. Here's the problem. You're a size 12 and you've been wearing a size 10.5 combat boot for the last 5 years. And that's what they issued me. And he goes, didn't it hurt a lot when you first got them in all these years? And, my reaction was, yeah, it hurt a lot, but I thought they were supposed to hurt. I thought combat boots were supposed to be really, really uncomfortable. And so that's my analogy. And I tell people about starting a business. It doesn't have to be that hard. And that's one of the things we've done in our franchise. We want to create work-life balance. Our franchisees do not work over 40 hours a week. It'd be very atypical if they did. It happens sometimes, but that business, I put all my heart and soul into it. And the challenge was about a year and a half into it, I was still growing. I got a note from the Army reminding me I was a reserve officer and I was going to deploy. I had about 6 months to get everything in order. And I knew that business wouldn't last more than 6 minutes without me. I was the business. So I went to sell it. And as you can probably imagine, there's a lot of really interested buyers, a company with that growth and that margin. But everybody that looked at it realized that at that 1.3 million, I did 980,000 of that revenue. I had a 76% close rate in the home. My best salesperson had a 39% close rate in the home. So, everybody looked at it and said, if you hadn't run the appointments, if your best salesperson ran the appointments, you would have lost money. I had a lot of turnover. I was running the business, and basically they said, if we pull you out of it, we think it's going to fail. And it did. I had someone take it over as an earnout that I was going to get a small percentage of the revenue 6 months after they took over. And into my deployment, about 2 months, I got a note from them. They were out of business, which was extremely painful, but it was an extremely painful, really good lesson. When I came back and started the franchise I launched, I made sure that I was not the business from day one.
I think a lot of entrepreneurs make that mistake. And I don't know if you did you ever read The E-Myth Revisited by Michael Gerber?
That absolutely was one of the first books I read when I got back. Someone recommended it to me, and it made all the sense in the world.
Yeah, it's all about creating systems. And for those of you that haven't read it, even if you're never going to be a franchise, it talks and teaches you to build your business as if it were, so that you have something of value when you pull yourself out of that business, because you've created systems and that whole business doesn't depend on you.
So you mentioned your franchise. You came back from being deployed and that business was no more. So what happened next? How did you get started with your original franchise?
Yeah, so right before I left, I was introduced to a company called Shelf Conversions, and they had about 5 employees. They were local to Richmond, Virginia, where I lived. And they were doing this business where they were putting in custom pull-out shelves, wooden shelves in people's homes, and they wanted to scale it. They wanted to grow. And it was really interesting. They were in a 2,000 square foot, 2,500 square foot space, 5 employees, and they had already gone out and bought a 9,000 square foot building to produce a lot of pull-out shelving in. And I thought it reminded me a little bit of Field of Dreams. Like they didn't have a plan, but they went and bought the building, which, I think sometimes my favorite definition of an entrepreneur is jumping off a cliff and building the plane on the way down. So that was definitely their jumping off the cliff moment. And they were going to make it work. So they originally talked to me about franchising, and ironically, talked them out of it because they didn't have any systems, processes. They didn't have anything documented. They were just kind of doing things, flying by the seat of their pants. And it was working pretty well at that scale, but they weren't going to be able to scale it and teach others how to scale it. So I came up with a plan for them to have a dealer model, to sign people up as dealers, teach them a little bit of how to sell it, install it, but actual existing businesses to kind of add this on as a product. So I gave them the plan. That's what they hired me to do. I came back from my deployment about 6 months later, and I just called them up to check on and said, how's the plan? And they said, the plan is great. We were just waiting for you to come back and do the plan for us. So I didn't know what I was going to do next. So seemed like a good idea, became a partner in the company, and we brought on about 50 dealers our first year. I took over the local market, the B2C model, because they had their hands full growing a manufacturing company. And when I took it over, based on the lessons I had learned before, I started putting in systems. I started developing technology for it. I hired someone to answer the phone and book appointments. I started and I wasn't running the appointments. That's when I came up with designers, installers. The previous model, the person that came out to your house, his name was Kevin, and Kevin quoted you and Kevin installed you, and he was an employee. So I wanted to scale it. So I came up with designers, installers that were part-time, commission only. I only paid them when they sold or did the jobs, and just started scaling it from there. Because of that, I was able to open up Chicago, Milwaukee, Twin Cities, Atlanta, and Birmingham in under a year because, we created these systems and I didn't have to be in all these cities. And we got to about 5 million in sales in the first year. And I literally woke up one day and I remember thinking, this is a franchise. All that, I had a call center in place, all the things that I had to put into place to run these businesses, not living in those cities, is ultimately became what a franchise should be. And then we launched the franchise in the fall of 2008.
The best time in the economy we've ever seen, right?
Great.
Ironically, it was a terrifying time, but ironically it was. We were, the next year we're an Entrepreneur 500 company. The next year we're an Inc. 500 company. After that, we're the number 4 fastest growing home service franchise. Then we're number 1 the year after that. So it turned out to be a fantastic year, a couple years. One, because we brought in a lot of franchise partners because there was a lot of displaced executives that, got somewhat pushed into it. So it was really interesting to watch those people who, they lost their 6-figure job, didn't know what they're going to do, didn't know if they'd get another one. So they were somewhat forced into buying a franchise or doing something. And to see them thrive in that model, coming in like, I don't have a lot of options here. This looks really good, but really terrified. And then to see them go through that process and build really successful businesses was a lot of fun to watch. And also, we're very resilient from a downturn economy. When things, we do well in great economies, but when things get tough, people stop gutting their kitchens, pulling everything out, and they start doing smaller, affordable upgrades, which is completely in our wheelhouse.
So why don't you elaborate on that? We really haven't shared much about what the business is. That business actually was sold and then evolved into what you're doing now. So help us understand, exactly what the business is. I mean, I introduced you with Art of Drawers. This particular business that you're referencing is Shelf Genie, correct?
Right.
Okay.
Yep.
So tell us a little bit more about that business and how you ended up where you are now, because it's also really intriguing.
Yeah, it's an interesting journey. That Shelf Genie business was great. As I mentioned, we grew very quickly. 2016, at that point, we had 200 to 300 locations open up, thousands of people in the field. And that's when I got really frustrated because innovation came to a grinding halt almost. It felt like a halt. It would take a year just to get out a standard product. We would introduce new technology. It would take 6 months, a year just to get adoption on something because there's so many in the field, people in the field, and they were used to doing things the way we'd always did it. So that's where, you get people and, the change management, people don't like to change. We became that organization. We didn't start out that way. So, trying to be innovative with that problem and work around it, my solve for it was to create a second brand. I looked at, there's a lot of examples, but like the easiest one to understand would be Lexus to Toyota. Toyota started Lexus and created a more upscale brand, which I want to do, higher quality materials. We did better training, better customer service. And the idea was to award that to our top performing franchise partners who were still showing the ability to innovate and really wanted to change and innovate. And before I could actually do that, spent a couple years getting that ready to go. Neighborly came along. They own, I think, over 30 home service franchise brands and expressed an interest in buying Shelf Genie. And I agreed to do that. I had some business partners and investors, and it was time. It had been over a decade. But I didn't want to sell, and I didn't sell Art of Drawers, and also spent about $5 million building a technology package that literally runs the business for our franchise partners, allows them to scale and focus only on selling and growing their business, and they don't have to worry about operations along with the other things we do. So I licensed that technology to Shelf Genie. They have the 5-year-old version of it right now. They don't get any upgrades, but they're still using that. And we've spent a lot more money over the last 5 years as we've developed Art of Drawers and started franchising it about a year ago.
So I want to back up for a second because I want to highlight what you just said. Did you say, I want to make sure I heard it right, you spent $5 million on a technology package?
At that point, the number's gone up, but at that point, 5 years ago, it was about $5 million.
So now it's more.
Now it's more. We're putting a lot of money every month. I look at it, I take a very long-term view. If I can spend $10, $15, $20, $30,000 developing that technology into something that's going to save our franchise partners from having to do things operationally, and they can focus more on growth, we'll do that. If I can spend money to make things more efficient for our team, so we're not just adding body count and growing based on number of employees, if we can scale, and it's so much easier to do that. It's really hard to go in and create efficiencies with technology when you already have a lot of people. If you have 3 people in accounting and you get technology to make it so you only need 2, those 3 people are not super excited about and motivated to implement that technology and get it to work. But when you have 1 and you can make it so we don't have to add a second, they can become more efficient. It's a lot easier. So it really just becomes a lot about efficiency and getting people to focus on the right thing and the right people doing the right jobs. And, I think that's a big part of growth. You've got to focus on creating those efficiencies. And really, at this point, everybody should be a technology company that happens to. We're a technology company that happens to sell and install custom pull-out drawers in people's cabinets. And now we're doing refacing and some other things in the kitchen. But start out from day one with the idea that we're a technology company.
So with that said, this is where I want to pause and I've got my highlighter out, my yellow highlighter. We get a lot of people that say, why would I want to do a franchise for that? Or, wow, that franchise fee is high, or the royalties are high. So when you're paying a franchise fee, you're paying a franchisor for all this expertise and all these things that this franchisor has created. So you can just use the secret recipe to this business. Same with royalties. Like you said, it was $5 million, and that's changing because technology keeps evolving and you have to stay on top of that. So your royalties go to the franchisor, but in turn, those royalties support you as a franchisee because the franchisor, not all franchisors are the same. but good franchise companies are going to continue to evolve and stay relevant and keep their franchisees ahead of the ball and ahead of the game. So as an independent entrepreneur, who's doing all this for you, right? So you're either spending your time doing it, or you're spending some money to have somebody else do it for you so that you can just go out and run your business and scale. So I wanted to really highlight that because this comes up a lot with franchise fees and royalties and what am I getting for my money? And, I think it's pretty amazing what you've done. So I thought that deserves some extra attention.
Yeah. And, I think just in general, looking at franchises, I coach people all the time, if we're not a right fit for everybody. I think if you're looking at starting a franchise, just understanding how all that works. And, it really doesn't matter what the royalty is. The royalty can be 30%. It doesn't matter. It really matters what the bottom line is and the unit economics of that model. But yeah, a lot of people do focus on what the royalty is and all these different costs, but it's really about the unit economics of the model. How quickly can you get a return on your investment? If you're going to invest 100,000, 200,000, 300,000, how quickly, based on, what you're seeing the item 19, what you're getting from validation, are you going to get a return on that money? And if you can get it back in, 2 to 3 years, when most people buy an existing business, they're paying a multiple of 3, 4, 5 times profit. It takes them 3 to 5 years to get their return back. So if you can buy a franchise and get it back in the first year or two, or even 3 years, that's great. And what they're charging for royalties, I would make sure they are forward looking and ask questions like, where are you investing this money? Because, whether it comes to a website they've spent, $150,000 on or $5 million technology package, every one of our franchise partners benefits from that $5 million package of tech stack the same that they would if they were in business on their own and they spent that $5 million. That website that the franchisor built may have cost $50, $100, $200,000, whatever it costs. You get all the benefits as if you built that website on your own if you didn't buy a franchise. So I think it's really critical, how far out are they looking in their business and how forward thinking they are. But I would not worry about, our royalty is 7%, so it's right there in the norm. But it really doesn't matter. If we could create unit economics where you can make 25, 30% net profit and our royalty was 20%, that's great. I haven't figured out how to do that. But we want to make sure everybody's successful. And I think that's why franchising is a partnership. We need to be successful. Our franchise partners do. And that's really where the synergy comes, where we both can. And if the unit economics don't support both, then it's going to be a train wreck.
Yeah, because the franchisor has to stay afloat too. So it's definitely a very symbiotic relationship, I'm sure.
Absolutely. And I love that you pointed out the royalty piece because I have that conversation with clients all the time who are comparing brands and comparing royalty amounts. And I always share with them what you really need to care about, to your point, is what's that ROI and what are you getting for that royalty? Because like Roxanne pointed out, not all franchises are the same. And so you could be paying 6% and getting absolutely nothing, or be paying twice that and be getting $5 million worth of technology. And, and all those things that can, to what you were saying, Alan, help you generate more revenue. So it's a definitely thought-provoking conversation for sure.
And there's other places that franchisors make money. So there's lots of, they could be making money from selling your product. They could be making money as rebates from the people that are selling your product. So to a certain extent, it can become a shell game, where, they might have a low royalty, but they're making more money over here, or they might have a higher royalty, but they're not making as much over here. So again, it really just boils down to the unit economics on that business and how much money are you going to make based on all the factors, including royalty and cost of goods and everything else.
Exactly. At the end of the day, how much money are you taking home? That's really what you want to know, right? That's what matters. That and the support of the franchisor. So yeah. So moving into, you said you added some other services. So tell us a little bit more about that. Cabinet refacing and lighting.
Yeah. So that's one of the things we're really excited about. We spent about 3 years making sure we got right what was cabinet refacing, which industry-wide, if you look at it, those can be $15,000, $20,000, $25,000 sales. I can't tell you what our average is, but that's an industry average. They're much larger sales, and the quoting and the pricing and the work, we've locked that down. So we're already in someone's home. If someone gets custom pull-out drawers, there's a very good percentage chance that you're going to want to get cabinet refacing at some point. And if you get cabinet refacing, there's a good chance that you're going to want to get custom pull-out shelving, or we added in cabinet lighting. Because if you do any of those three, you've just committed to your cabinets long-term. You now have a long-term relationship with your cabinets. So you're not going to get new cabinets anytime soon. So if you made them more functional by doing all the things on the inside to get you more space, better organization, easy access, and you want them to look nicer on the outside, we're there for our customers.
Well, and your background is an example of what your business does, right? You can see some of the pull-out shelves back there and the cabinet lighting.
Yes, and that's not real, by the way. This is not my kitchen. It's one of our photos. But behind me, see what we do. We do a lot of pantries. We do cabinets. And it really does make a big difference. When it comes to noble purpose and what we do, I always talk to franchise partners, especially the ones when they come to Discovery Day. You'll be surprised at how big of a difference this makes. And it's not until you get some customers and you go out and talk to them that you really see that difference. But we really make a huge difference for the elderly. More than half the falls where people fall and break their hip and don't come out of the hospital happen in the kitchen, more than in the bathroom. Wow. We turn a lot of frustration into joy, and that's it. People are hugging our installers. They're naming pets after them. That's literally, that's the big difference we make. Like, we just had an installer talk about how he finished a job and they were like speechless, and they just hugged me. They didn't know what to say. And then they hugged me a couple more times. And they're like, thank you so much. He's like, well, thank you for the hugs. This is great.
That's interesting, because you look at the product itself and it's pull-out shelving. So you have to look at the big picture. Who would have thought that would have pull-out shelving, making your cabinets and so forth more functional, would have created that type of feeling for people? It's very interesting.
And you can't fully grasp it until you see it. And I still get a little surprised at home shows. We'll have, if we've been in a market for more than a year, we'll get customers that come into that booth because they keep going back to these home shows, and they'll stand in the middle and say, I want everybody to know this is the best thing I've ever done. Wow. They get so excited about it.
Wow.
Until you can see it and, how much we change people's lives. We had a lady with Parkinson's. The Parkinson Foundation actually paid for half of the job, and she wasn't able to cook. And when we got done with the install, she was able to call her husband up and say, when you come home, I'm going to cook a meal for you. So we make some really big differences in people's lives. And who would have thought that it's, such a big deal? We're right now, I would estimate about $100 million a year industry. And that's mostly Shelf Genie and us. And there's some guys in trucks, but you can't do this business without scale. So that's the final thing I would say our franchise partners are most excited about, is the vision of where we're going. I spent my first 5 years at Shelf Genie waking up at 2 a.m. and worried about, and by the way, as any kind of business owner, franchise or not, you are going to wake up at 2 a.m. about something. That's one of the questions I always ask business owners, franchise owners or not, what's keeping you up at night? Because something always is. And that was the thing that was keeping me up, is closet companies were going to figure out how well we were doing and start doing it themselves. And I finally got up the courage to talk to, I knew California Closet by Design, Closet Factory CEOs. And I finally got the courage to go, hey, why aren't you guys doing this? And they said, we can't. We go into a closet and we put up, melamine wall here and there, and it's 12 inches apart, 24 inches apart, and we put standard things in it. But you go into existing cabinets, we build down to the millimeter with wood, width, depth, height. We do all these different customization, different rails, wood types. We have almost infinite SKUs, and that's what our technology does. Is it enables us to quote instantly and stick the landing on 28% cost of goods, plus or minus 1%, almost all the time. So you can't quote without it, and our process integrates with all the manufacturing partners. So it custom builds it, tracks the orders. You can see where every job is along the way. We've put so much into our technology that you cannot do what we do without this technology at scale. You can do it in a truck with a pen and pad and paper, but you can't do it at scale without this. So we're most excited about our franchise partners can now take this technology and take it to closet companies, countertop companies, kitchen remodelers, and license the technology to them and get a percentage of their sales. So we've got this B2B SaaS model that's exciting. And, from a financial standpoint, it's exciting. But I think the most exciting thing is we're building an industry. Our industry is 100 million. How much would you guys guess the closet industry is? Just guess.
I would assume it's close to that, somewhere in the same ballpark.
Is that wrong?
60 billion.
Oh my. Wow.
Oh, wow.
$60 billion industry.
Wow.
And it's because there's a low barrier to entry. Like you can start doing closets tomorrow, just buy some melamine, put it in there, put things between it. There's a low barrier to entry to do it. But that's why they become a big industry and they pay less than $100 to get in people's homes. Some of them don't market at all because everybody knows about it. So the bigger it got, the more everybody knew about it. So if you would pay, $5,000-$10,000 for a custom closet, you're our customer. But we have even a larger customer base. Yeah. But
I'm a closet person.
Yeah, everybody that would do that, because everybody that looks at what we do, I've yet to meet someone that says, I don't want that. It's really just priorities and stage of life and value for them at the time. But we also have a demographic that closet companies don't. We have what I call the millionaire next door, the seniors, baby boomers who would never pay $1. They love their white wire shelves. Their clothes hang just fine on that. But the bending and reaching, and they like to cook. That's our customer too. So we arguably have a larger target audience than the closet industry, which is 60 billion. And the only reason we're not at 60 billion or bigger is because no one else can do it at scale without the software. So our franchise partners get to go out and license that software. And they're going to stay the California Closets. California Closets still has the largest market share of any closet company, but they have a very small piece of a much larger pie. And that's what we're really setting ourselves up to, is be the Kleenex, be the California Closets name brand. But imagine being the second closet company and getting royalty on every other closet company that exists.
Wow.
Awesome.
Pretty amazing.
Yep.
And I would assume, you talked about running. I had a previous running career and got gimped up. I've had both my knees scoped, and there was a period of time where my knees would not allow me to get down to that bottom cabinet, or like all your pants are like shoved into the back corner. I couldn't do it. So I'm assuming that there's another demographic that's either disabled or has knee replacements or hip replacements, and they probably don't want to get down on their hands and knees and crawl into their cabinets anymore.
Yeah, it's a universal design, is what they call that. So aging in place. That's a lot of our customers. And even if they can't, we turn frustration and pain into joy and love. But also there's other emotions. There's embarrassment. If you have to ask people to get you things, the family comes over, can you get up and get that? Or can you get in the back and do that? And if you can start doing it on yourself, we're giving, a lot of, self-esteem back to the older generation, that now they can do things that they couldn't, or they can do it much more safely.
Well, safety is a key for sure.
Yeah.
So, Alan, we are very grateful that you joined us today. Tell us, if somebody wanted to get a hold of you, we know you're busy, so we appreciate you taking time out of your day. How would somebody reach you if they wanted to learn more about Art of Drawers?
Yeah, send me an email, ayoung@artofdrawers.com.
Perfect.
Thank you, Alan. We really do appreciate you. And thank you for everyone that's tuning in to us today. Sarah and I are very active on LinkedIn. We would love it if you would reach out to connect with us. I'm Roxanne Rapske, Rapske. Sarah Waskow, Waskow. You can also learn more about us on frannet.com. And we have a YouTube channel, Frannet of Dallas, Fort Worth, and Oklahoma. And lastly, you can listen to Unpredicted Entrepreneur on all of the podcasting platforms.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thanks for having me.